So, welcome everybody to the Monday lunchtime session of the StreetGames Conference 2021, and we will be talking today about young people as researchers. So this bit of work is something that Lucy and I have done quite a bit on over the last couple of years in different projects and kind of different pieces of work. So we're going to share a little bit about what's been done, a bit about a few things that are coming up, and then get you guys to think about some action planning and some top tips on how you can get this going in your area. So just a few introductions before we start. My name's Claire, I'm the National Director for Wales. Quite involved in some of the research pieces that we do. Got a kind of sport and youth work background and have been at StreetGames for 9 years almost. Lucy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, lovely to see you. If any of you wanted to, take yourselves onto camera so we could see your lovely faces, that would be great. Yeah, and I'm the National Volunteering Manager at StreetGames. What we're going to do, we're going to launch straight in with a quick get to know you energizer. So I'm going to put you in a breakout room with a couple of other delegates, and what we want you to do, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to find out the weirdest commonality you have between you. So the most unlikely, the most uncommon thing between you. So I will put you into breakout rooms. Please accept and have a little chat with your fellow other delegates for a couple of minutes, and then we'll get you back and we'll crack on from there. Awesome. I think we're all back in the room, more or less. So thanks very much for doing that. I wonder what research techniques you all use to figure that out. It would be great if, whilst Claire was just going through the next bit, if you could pop your uncommon commonalities in the chat, please, so we can see what the common denominators were.
Brilliant. And as you're doing that, I will keep going because we're really mindful we've got a lot to pack in before 1 o'clock, so we'll keep going. So in today's session, we're going to look a little bit at youth voice, what this is, what it means, why it is important at StreetGames, and why we hope it's important to you and your organisation. We're going to look at some of the advantages and some of the barriers about involving young people in research, and we're going to share some examples of peer research in action. We're also then at the end going to look at some top tips and some resources to help you develop your own peer research projects within your organisations, and we've got a little action plan for you guys to take part in this afternoon. So straight over to Lucy then for a bit of interaction.
What I would love everyone to do is to go to either their web browser on a phone or open up another web browser on your whichever device you're using, and go to Menti, that's MENTI.com. I will share my screen also so that you get this information. And it will ask you for a code. And that code is hopefully at the top of the screen that you can see. I will also put the link into the chat box so you can make your way there. But the code they're asking for is 11330509, and I want you to answer the question that's on the screen. So what words spring to mind when you think youth voice? I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Amazing, we're off. Do shout if you have any technical questions or problems. And the way that this word cloud works means that the words that are most commonly used, so most used, the words like empowerment currently, inclusion, understanding, they're the ones that have come up the most, which is great. So really kind of adds a bit of weight to the ones that you've suggested. So we've had 16, 17 entries. I'll give you 30 more seconds to try and add your input. But coming out strong really are empowerment, understanding, inclusion, honest, and listening, which is great. So thank you very much for using that. We might well come back to Mentimeter, so don't close everything down just yet. So yeah, this is what's now on the screen. Thank you everyone for sharing what your ideas were. This actually on the left was a word cloud created with some of the Street Games young people when we asked them what youth voice meant. And so there are some commonalities in terms of they didn't quite come up with the word empowerment, but kind of change and progress and opinions and ideas, which was obviously has a huge impact on those young people. In particular, they said one young person said youth voice represents the voice of those who control the future, which is quite interesting. It's the type of voice that needs to be heard, because without the youth speaking their thoughts, the future will be limited on creativity and progress. And another one said, youth voice is being heard, being able to get my point across and have a valid opinion that's taken on board. And that's exactly what it all is. So at Street Games, for us, we simply kind of put it down to three things. It's asking, so providing that opportunity for them to share their thoughts, and crucially listening. I know that was another big thing on the word cloud that you guys put together. And not only listening, but then actually taking action on what they say. It's all well and good asking and listening, but if you're not going to make a change, then there's probably not much point asking in the first place. And so the asking part and the listening part especially can involve, consultation, co-creation, and kind of peer research, which is why we're here today. So why is it important? Hopefully some of the things that you've already put in there, and the reason you're here is because you believe it is important. And not only is it their human right, so according to the United Nations Rights of the Child, children and young people have a right to have their opinions and to be able to voice those opinions. But it's all these other things that we've got on the script. We love a word cloud if you haven't figured that bit out yet. It's all these other things that are on screen. So things like all the benefits to the young people, but also the benefits to the organisations, to yourselves, and the projects and the interventions that you're planning to do. So if you switch back to your Mentimeters on your phones or on your laptops or whatever you're using, there should be another question, which is, what are the advantages of involving young people in research? So again, if you want to have a quick little think about what you think the advantages are. So we've got real answers, insight, authentic voices, real insight, insight-led. So there's a lot of people talking about, the reality, the real, honest, raw answers that young people give us. Someone talking about the different perspective. It's absolutely not for us to say what we think young people think. And so, yeah, absolutely about understanding the youth, what they need, and so they can have some ownership. Wow, loads of really, really brilliant stuff there. Thank you very much for sharing that. So I'm going to stop sharing and hope that Claire can share a few things that we came up with. Here's one we made earlier, a la Art Attack, but it's not a word cloud this time, sorry. So as it said on the screen, yeah, empowerment, that was the key theme that you guys all brought out, which was amazing. Really giving young people a voice. Access, so in particular, when we talk about peer researchers, we'll talk about that shortly. Young people, they can reach their mates, their peers, the ones that potentially that aren't involved in your projects, for example. They're the ones that are able to get a greater reach within their existing networks. There was a lot of people bringing up lived experiences, and again, that's really crucial, both, you know, from a researcher perspective, because if they're the ones that they've lived it and they're able to ask the right questions, and hopefully you just get the right answers. Better data, so we say better in that we have seen that young people are way more responsive to their peers than someone like myself going to ask the question, because quite often they might answer thinking I want a particular answer rather than the honest truth. Yeah, some points about creativity, and again about the kind of the communities that we are interested in, like really links to that access point. And absolutely, for us, it's about the investment and the benefits for the young people. So things like confidence, skill development, all the skills that they can transfer into employment, and that point at the end as well, the kind of sense of pride in achieving something and getting from A to B, start to finish.
So the next bit then is about what the barriers to research are with young people. Lucie, have we got another Mentimeter for this? Is that on the same thing? No, we're just going to do this one on the screen. So what I want you to do now is to just pop in the chat. So what do you think some of the barriers are to research with young people, and or young people being involved in research? So have a little think. What are some of those barriers? Research ethics, brilliant, Chris. Trust issues, timescales, yeah, definitely, Stacey. Any others? Jargon associated with research, yeah. The young people know what research is and how to get involved. Often schools send the active children, yeah, Nigel. Willing volunteers, research can be boring, perceived as boring. Brilliant. Keep them coming in, and I'm going to share some of the stuff that we've come up with and what some young people have told us. So just around kind of, if we think about this from two spaces. So if you think about traditional research with a researcher talking to young people, as Lucie kind of said just now, some young people might not want to talk to that strange person. Who is this in my community asking me all these things? And or they might tell you what they think you want to hear. I'm sure many people on this call have done a survey in their time and found it frustrating perhaps when there's been a low return rate across surveys that we send out, or it's the same people filling them in time and time again. Sometimes when we do kind of focus group type activities or participatory research, sometimes it's the loudest voice that might be the only one that's heard, which can then skew some of the results. If we're looking at research within peer groups, that social complexity can be a real barrier. So again, that concept of the loudest voice or the most popular person, everyone else might then go along with that. Thinking about things when we're really trying to generate that youth voice, is the environment right to encourage that new ideas and the real, I guess, feedback of is this working, is this not working? There's a real science actually behind whether that environment is right or not. Sometimes it can be perceived that there needs to be this increased resource or effort to engage young people in research. As I think somebody put it in the chat about, do young people even want to do research? That concept of being a researcher, is that really exciting or anything they want to be involved in? And kind of the safeguarding / ethical concerns about young people being the researcher. How do we make sure that things are safe and that things can be reported properly and that the young person is protected, the young people are protected that are doing the research, etc., etc. There's a huge long list there really of things that might put us off. getting young people involved or kind of driving this idea of young people as researchers. But what we're going to share now is some of the, I guess, concept behind what we mean by peer researcher, where it sits within the research world, and then we're going to share some examples. And we've got Katy Evans on the call that I'm really desperate to get her on and talking, and me and Lucie will be quiet for a minute. So what do we actually mean by peer research? So essentially, we're talking about young people gathering information from their peer group or from others the same age, in the same community, maybe in their school class, maybe in their club, people that are within their circle. So by doing it this way, we're putting the young person at the heart of it. We're doing all the things that we've already talked about in terms of developing skills, etc., etc. And we're really, or we've found that the research that we're getting back is much more true and authentic in places. But this isn't just another street games idea. So this is actually embedded within citizen science. So by this, what we mean is a member of the society researching in their own environment. So this could be by observing what's going on and kind of reporting back, could be asking questions, doing a survey, running a small focus group, or it could be at the other end of research around planning what some of that research looks like, what do we want to find out, how can we find it out, maybe analysing some of the data returns that they come back with or that come back in, or sharing the research at the other end of it. So research is not just about, or peer research as we're talking about, is not just about getting a young person to go and ask their mates a load of stuff. Research is obviously much more complex than that. So there's some examples on here of what citizen science is. It's really quite a jargon term for what we're talking about. You hear quite a lot about citizen science within kind of nature-based studies and kind of population size data sets and stuff like that. It's quite big in environmental world right now. I mean, how many of you have ever answered a poll on Instagram, or I don't know, did the RSPB Garden Birdwatch last year, or those kinds of things are categorized as citizen science. What we're talking about is on a much more local level of how can the young people that you engage with within whatever your setting is look at it from your community's point of view, which could then lead to wider population data. But this could be, like we said, collecting data, looking at kind of games-based activities to gather information, looking at the analysis side of things, lots of different elements to what we're talking about here. But instead of boring you with all the theory, we're going to go straight over to a couple of case studies. So we're really lucky today that we've got Katy Evans on the call, who worked with us on a project for the FAW Trust over in Wales called Trust in Us. So Katy, over to you just to explain a little bit about that project.
Yeah, fab. Thanks, Claire, and thanks for having me today. It's been really good actually just to reflect back on the project and kind of what we did and what we learned. It's been a year of being apart now, hasn't it? So it's quite nice to be back together. So yeah, I was the football development manager at the FAW Trust, so the Football Association in Wales, and my remit was female participation. And I started the role in 2018, and we started conversations quite early on with Street Games actually around how we can reach different communities, particularly the teenage audience, where female participation is naturally less than the male counterparts anyway, and the teenage demographic was even less again. So we really wanted to do something targeted around that area. And we were pretty open for probably the first time that a governing body has been in that sense, that we weren't looking to take a ready-made product out to some communities and expect them to fall in love with it and want to keep playing it. So what we did from the start really was leave it very open, took quite a lot of guidance from Street Games really in terms of how we can reach those communities that maybe we haven't done that much with before, or there's been limited engagement. So the idea came about that we use young people as researchers, and they in essence shape what it looks like, shape what the delivery is, and then come back and tell us what the big challenges were, what the barriers are to football, what girls in their communities actually want and what they don't want, and what they've tried before and what hasn't worked. So lots of planning through 2018, and then by 2019 then we got it off the ground. So working with different partners, so there's a range of doorstep sport clubs, local authority teams, different community groups that Street Games obviously had a huge network with across the country. And they helped identify girls then around 14 to 16 years old who would be interested in helping us, and they either already had an affinity to football and wanted to get even more girls falling in love with it in their area, or they were just involved in their community in a different capacity and said, yeah, I'd quite like to get involved in that. So there was a huge range, and you know, the top left picture there, Meg in the pink, she's a very competitive footballer. So for her, she was desperate to be involved and just get more girls following her path. Some of the other girls there had never played before, and this for them was almost the start of our journey, I suppose, in tackling some of those perceptions and building their affinity to the sport for the first time. So once we'd got our group of girls, there was about 15 of them identified across the country. Street Games helped to start the pre-engagement, so obviously trying to give them an insight into what we're trying to do, what their role would be, and the fact it was all, you know, based around them. We brought them down to Newport, so into our development centre, so nice facility there with the, you know, what we class as perfect place for sport, so nice 3G pitch, nice facility, nice conference room, all the swanky stuff that really doesn't really matter to anybody. But for some of them, they'd never been out of their areas, so some of them came down from North Wales and they'd never been down to South Wales before. So even that, I think when we first started this, we hadn't really considered that to be a part of the whole project, but for some of these girls, that was massive for them, coming down and being a part of the project on a national scale, and it gave them quite a big sense of pride, I think, to be involved in something like this and taking something national back to their local communities. On that day, so the top middle picture there, we did, you know, lots of breakouts that Street Games love to do, and all the interactive stuff and what their role would be and how they'd market it and who they need to help and where they might set up their sessions. All of those things we helped them do. We then put on lots of practical sessions, so ranging from a very traditional game of, you know, 5 or 7, 11 aside, however many people were in the session, to fitness sessions, so a circuit based around football, but very much around the fitness element, kind of a skills and tricks corner. So if they didn't want to play any football, but they wanted to go home learning a cool skill, then they could do that. And then a bit more of the dance movement element with the ball, which was very hit or miss. Some loved it, some hated it, which was quite fun. And I think from that day, the girls, we tried to open their mind that actually if they loved one aspect of it, is to keep in mind that when they do take options back, is that they are still finding out what the girls in their community want, because there might still be very different you know, choices when they take it back. So they all left that day with, you know, equipment bags over their shoulders, went back with their local partners back into their communities. We thought it was really important to try and keep the communication up. So we set up a Facebook page, you know, all private. They could post in that, share their updates, keep in touch with each other. And there was no communication whatsoever on the group. And, you know, we were chatting between us. We said, oh God, we better, you know, prompt some conversation. We better pose some questions. We better get the communication going. Still nothing. When we met with the girls, then we brought them down to a Wales-New Zealand game down in Cardiff, and we spoke to them, and, you know, very informal focus group then, just trying to find out from them how it's going and what's going on. And they all just looked at each other and laughed, and we said, oh, you know, we just want you to be in touch, we want you to build some friendships. They were like, yeah, we've got our own WhatsApp group, we don't need your Facebook group. And I think for us, although that's something quite small, I think for us, we thought that we were empowering them right from the start, but even with that, that's what we thought they might want. But they've gone and done their own thing anyway. So they didn't, you know, need our old school Facebook. They were already on it, and they've all started forming friendships without us. So yeah, that put us in our place straight away. So from this, we obviously kept regular communication and kept that conversation going then of how it's going. Street Games commissioned a researcher, so we're really lucky to have some real insight then that she was able to keep in touch with the girls directly and the Doorstep Sport Club contacts and everyone else that was involved to get the insight as they went along. Feedback from the girls then generally was the fact that it was very different in every community. So the Blaenau Gwent girls picked what they thought would be perfect in terms of the Mugger facility right in the heart of the community. The sport development team funded it. They could run sessions for free, target it in the local area. Loads of girls turned up the first week, and then there were loads of boys crowded around the outside. Nobody came back again because they obviously didn't want that from the sessions. So for them, it was back to the drawing board, and it took them quite a while to set back up because they'd put all their energy into what they thought was right, but actually it didn't work for their area. But fair play to them, you know, they weren't put off by that. They worked with the team and sourced an indoor venue down the road instead. Aya then in Cardiff set up a session straight away. She was the first, I think, we met one week and by the next week she'd set it up, working with her community providers. She had very good links back in her secondary school, so targeted it there, and the girls all knew her. So she walked down the street and said, "Girls football on Monday, come along." And they were there because they trusted her. She could relate to them. She told them they could wear whatever they want. So lots of the girls were wearing their hijabs. They didn't have to have the, shorts and t-shirts that so many of the sessions do. So lots of those barriers, because she could relate to them and she put it on in an area that she knew that they could access, and she was running the session. They instantly trusted her and wanted to keep turning up. The format then was very different depending on what the girls wanted, and they've evolved, and we've been able to get some of the girls on coaching courses and develop that way. But some of them haven't wanted that. Some of them just wanted to be involved, to develop themselves, to be involved in research for the first time. Their confidence has just grown immensely. I think we were chatting earlier about one of the girls down from West Wales, and to engage with at the beginning was really difficult, and real lack of confidence, really bad experiences through her college days. And through this program, she's made one of her best friends through it now, and we can just see her confidence grown, and she's moved across to Bristol now, and she's working there. So I think for us it had far more impact than we ever really set out to do, and we didn't really know what the outcomes would be. Internally, as a governing body, I think it was the first time that we've gone out there as a project with no real end in sight of what it will tell us. But for us, we involved quite a lot of the coach education department in our days, so in the training days, and we asked them to deliver. And I think by them feeling a very different format of the game, and being around different people who we don't have many teenage girls playing the game in comparison to boys. So for a lot of our key people who work in the governing body, for them to see it themselves, I think has started to shape some of their mindsets. So yeah, for us, it was a project over kind of 9-10 months, but I think impact wise, huge learning in terms of young people being in the communities themselves, the insight, like some of these guys touched on earlier. One of them said to me, "Oh, she's never going to come tell you that, but this is what she thinks." And again, we like to think we're open and we'll listen and we want to know it, but they just won't. So yeah, definitely the way forward for us in terms of if we want to do anything that's genuinely going to have an impact, then it needs to involve the people who are in the communities and who can genuinely relate to people. I think that's me, Claire. Back to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie. And I guess we just wanted to share this one slide with you. This is one of the slides that we shared in the launch event with the young researchers, but we also had in the room project leaders from communities, staff from the FOWT, and we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that they were part of this bigger research project together. I guess, Katie, just a question for me about, I'm going to put you on the spot because we have not rehearsed this, sorry, but just about some of the research methods that the young people used. Was it prescripted? I guess we set the question around, tell us what your friends think about football in your community. Can you just describe some of the ways that some of the researchers went and found that? I guess Megan in Newport was really quite different to some of the stuff up north and out west.
Yeah, it was really varied, to be honest. And I think we were okay with that from the offset because we wanted them to shape it how it suited them. And some were quite young, really, in terms of, their age, but also their maturity with doing this type of research. So it was quite a big task, really, for them to go and find out, a huge, broad insight into what people think and what they want. So yeah, a couple of the Newport girls developed their own survey. So they were kind of top end, they were more 16, 17-year-olds, were quite confident in doing that, and actually they had an invested interest in finding out even more in their area. So they wanted to understand the whole perceptions, the barriers, the access to provision in their area, but on quite a broad scale. And the return on that was massive. I can't remember the numbers now, but at the time I remember thinking, we've put out surveys as a governing body before and have not had that type of return. And also the spread of it, so the amount of people that were sharing it, because they had the relationships or because they had an invested interest themselves and they could relate to the girls. And yeah, it got really good traction. But then in other areas, it was very informal. So I know Aya was very much in person, so she didn't really do anything kind of written or formal, but the amount of insight she got just from speaking to people when she was in the community. And that was both, around the football session and in her day-to-day walking down the street, speaking to people. And it was almost a part of her life in a way, that it was so natural that she just did it very informally, and would feed back to us then, and we'd just pick up the phone and have a chat about it because she was more comfortable doing it that way. Some of the others then tried to do more of like a formal interview style. So when the girls came along, they might take one out of a session and just try and do a bit of a Q&A with them. So yeah, it was very varied, and they had the overall kind of framework, if you like, of what we were looking to achieve, but it was so loose that they could shape it then, depending on what they wanted.
Brilliant, thanks Katy. We'll have a bit of time for Q&A at the end, so if there's anything that you want to pick Katy's brains on, pop it in the chat or kind of hold it for the end. But we're just going to share one more example. So Lucie, do you want to talk us through our new Youth Endowment Fund peer researcher project for the East Midlands, please?
Yeah, so this is a project that is basically starting this week. So I'm sorry I don't have loads of brilliant stories just yet, but we are starting a peer researcher project funded by the Youth Endowment Fund, so specifically working and targeting young people who are involved with or at risk of getting involved with the youth justice system. And we have been successful in the East Midlands, so focusing specifically in Nottingham. I have some awful nicknames like Shottingham, for example, which is why we're focusing there. Really really high levels of youth violence, and so the 2-year project is very much based around some of the learning that we took from the model of the FAW Trust in Us project, in that we will be training, recruiting and training 12 peer researchers from within the locally trusted organisations in Nottingham, so part of the StreetGames network that already do a lot of this brilliant community safety work, and they will be paid, so they will be paid, almost paid members of staff, so to really add some value to them, and they will design, much like in the Trust in Us, they will design and run research projects to better understand the causes, the nature and potential ways of reducing the amount of young people getting involved in violence, and there's going to be quite an extensive training package and support. Training is mainly from like the Youth Endowment Fund, but also backed up by some of the research team and our team at StreetGames. And we very much know that there needs to be a lot of pastoral support to support these young people to run these research projects, linked to all the kind of barriers that were really briefly touched upon earlier, with the nature of this topic being incredibly difficult to talk about. And based on their networks, so again, we're looking at that kind of benefit of access and lived experience. We'll utilise their networks to carry out the research. And again, it's very much going to be led by them, so the methods that they think will work. So we don't know if they'll use surveys or consultations or like interviews, or much like Aya, walking down this like round the streets and kind of ear to the ground type information. That's yet to be determined, but through some of the training and support we'll provide them. And then on the back of that, a number of children and young people in the areas will get involved in some designing and putting into practice some social action projects, based on some of the research, then just trying to kind of come up with some answers or some solutions to some potential to what the outcomes of the research, and so we don't know what that might be. Again, it might be kind of short taster sessions, or structured long-term projects that like real strong intervention projects to support the findings. So we don't know what it yet looks like, but it follows a very similar model for on a slightly bigger scale.
Brilliant, thanks Lucie. And with that Youth Endowment Fund project, that's a national project that we're a part of in one region. So if that's something that you're particularly interested in, pop your name and your email address in the chat, and we can try and connect you with the relevant other organisations in other regions that are part of that project as well. So moving on then, very conscious of time. So I'm going to whiz through some top tips, and these are really just things to think about, and we're going to share all this content with you afterwards. I'm going to whiz through the top tips, and then we're going to put you into breakout rooms to start thinking about how can you put some of this into practice in your own organisations, or what are some of the questions that you need to be figuring out before you can put stuff into practice. So based on the case studies that we've shared and some of the insight that we already know about this type of work, that communication, as Katy alluded to, is really, really key. Making sure that if you are involving young people as researchers, who is their touch point? Who is it that's keeping them in the loop about what's going on? Who's checking in on them from a safeguarding perspective, from an ethics point of view? Who's making sure that everything is going well? And when it isn't, who's their support mechanism to kind of help them overcome the problems and figure it out locally? Are you making sure that in terms of research tools, have they got everything in a toolbox that they need to help them find out whatever the research topic is? So that could be support to help them get a survey online, or here's some ideas of how you do focus groups, consultations, here's some ideas about what an interview might look like, or here's how you do an Instagram poll and find out the answers. So figuring that out with the young people is really, really key. How are you making sure that their ideas are brought to life? So we might think we know all that there is to know about research and research methods and all of this stuff, but actually, we said it on one of the other slides, they'll come up with stuff that we haven't thought about. How do we make sure that they're supported to bring that to life? How are you making sure that they feel part of something? So that sense of belonging in any kind of volunteering is really, really key. And when you're thinking about this from a research perspective, whether it's paid or voluntary, how do they feel part of a bigger picture here? How are they valued? How do they feel that their contribution is really making a difference? And then that last little icon on the screen there of the certificate is, how are we making sure that they are able to reflect on the skills that they're learning? And how are we able, if at all, to give any kind of further education or qualifications in this space or in something similar to boost their CV going forward? So that's just loads of things to think about. Try and hold them in your head for a second. We've got loads of resources in this kind of space that are available. So I think Lucie's going to put up a couple of links in the chat. But again, if this is something you're interested in, we can share some things with you afterwards. We've got a couple of draft toolkits around youth voice that we are very happy to share and get some feedback on. We've got a consultation guide around how to start doing some of this stuff in your organisation. We can share the case study about young people as researchers in the Trust in Us project. And then we've got a social action guide that we delivered as part of an NCS project that we can share with you as well. So putting it into practice. Lucie, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thanks. Sorry, I wasn't quick enough to put the links in the chat, but we will definitely share those over the course of the next 15 minutes that we've got left in the workshop. So yeah, we're really keen to support you in thinking about what how you might be able to put some learning into practice. So we want you to have a little think about the provision and your local area and what you might want to find out from the young people that you engage with, or potentially if maybe you don't work directly with young people, think about how you might, what other questions you might want answered from the Street Games network, for example. What we're going to do, we're going to put you into breakout rooms, and we want you to have a little chat about what your research question might be, and then we also want you to have a little think about how you might get there. So kind of coming up with a quick little action plan. I will share this nice looking document on the right hand side, which has the questions that I'm not expecting you all to fill in the next 10 minutes, but to kind of prompt your discussions about how you might recruit, co-produce, develop the tools, like remain engaged, and support the young people that you might well be researching with. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. I'll also, I'm trying to multitask, which is never a good idea. But in the chat, I have shared a link with you for this document that's on the right-hand side. There, like in the middle of the page, there should be a document which you click on, it should automatically download, and then you can start typing if that's how you work. If not, you can make a few notes just on paper in front of you to share back. But I will stop talking. You can do the action plan. Well, I guess that's the end of our workshop, but it would be really helpful if any of you would be willing to share either in the chat or to unmute to talk about what you spoke about. Oh, Lisa Graham has raised her hand.
Hello. Yeah, I'll talk quick because we bounced ideas, and there was another lady that had an absolutely brilliant idea, which she's doing at the moment. But I said that the need to definitely engage other local community organisations, because they might have some people who are trusted and also faith leaders. Like my borough is really diverse and has, you know, large Muslim community as well as a really large Somali community as well. So there are people who the young people may have trusted, and as I know, and built up a relationship already. So I think it's a really good way of doing collectively, and then you could then try to engage then the young people to lead the project of them being and sharing ideas and leading the surveys and chats and things like that. But I think, yeah, from the point of view is like the collaboration with other community groups is key.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then there's Katy is doing something at the moment in her organisation, which it was absolutely brilliant. So.
Thanks, Lisa. Katy, do you want to share quickly?
I was just, I work for community centre. We don't have a particular reputation for working with young people. People assume that we are preschool and younger children. So we got some funding to do some marketing, but instead of just printing a whole lot of leaflets that people are going to ignore, we've actually used that money to engage with Children North East, and they're going to do some detached outreach work for us with young people to really start that research and find out what it is young people want, make them aware of it's available for them, as well as younger people, and just really find out what's needed and what's wanted, and then go from there.
Brilliant, sounds great. You'll have to keep us updated on how it goes. I know you're probably well linked in with either Mark Oliver or John Downs or the team in the North East. Chris, I can see in the chat you've put, considering the role of the local university and their research role, so finding the right person or people would be key. Do you want to share a little bit more?
Yeah, briefly, because I'm looking at the time. Yeah, I think it just reflects the conversation we were having in our group with Daryl. Yeah, I think potentially there might be some mileage there. It's about finding the right people or persons with you know, the right mindset, the right set of skills. You know, because I sense we're not talking here about pure academic research. We're talking about much more applied research that has an impact over a relatively short period of time. That's what I loved about the Wales project. It was that combination of research and co-design of services, wasn't it? So yeah, I mean, it might be for some of the people on the call, it might be about finding somebody within the local university to collaborate with.
Yeah, really good reminder of the resource, I guess, that universities can provide.
And it wouldn't have to be a sports researcher, by the way. It could be a sociologist or a somebody who's involved in youth work research. So think broadly about where you might look for people.
Great. I'm conscious that we are now just gone past 1 o'clock. Those of you, I think anyone that had a meeting has maybe dropped off. We are happy to carry on for another few minutes if anyone wants to. Has anyone got any? And I can see in the chat that Daryl, you've talked about engaging with the Xbox generation. I think combining gaming and like sports and physical activity is, I think, going to be a massive thing for the future. But has anyone else got any points or questions that they want to share with the group? Nope. I'll take that as radio silence is good stuff. So thank you very much again for everyone that was here, that joined us. Thank you especially to Katy as a guest appearance, sharing the brilliant Trust in Us project. But do get in touch with us if you've got any more questions or ideas, or are looking into doing that kind of stuff, because we'd absolutely love to help support you on that journey.
Brilliant, thanks everyone. And I guess just one last thing, if you wanted to be sent things or kept up to date on things and you put that in the chat, can you just drop your email address in and then we can follow that up with you. But apart from that, thanks for joining us today. Make sure you catch the rest of the conference. It's all free, it's all online. And let us know on social media how you found this morning or this afternoon. So go and enjoy your lunch if you haven't already. Thanks everyone.